Good day, everybody, and welcome to your Sport Communication and Media Relations course. My name is Dr. Timoyo, and I'll be facilitating your progress throughout this course. I do hope we will have a very good working relationship together. So let's start our first lecture by defining communication. Right, so simply put, communication is a process where there is an exchange of knowledge through verbal or non-verbal messages. So for communication to happen, there has to be a few things in place. First of all, there needs to be a message. Okay, so that is the information that will be transferred from the sender. The sender is the source of that information. It could be a person, it could be a computer, it could be a book. Anything that has a message or something to transmit will then become the sender. And then there is the medium. The medium is what or the tool that is used to transfer the message. So it could be air, for example, if I'm speaking to somebody face to face, then the medium of transferring that message is the air. Or if we are talking via the telephone, then the telephone waves become the medium in which we transfer the message from the sender to the receiver, which is the third thing that needs to be there in order for communication to occur. There needs to be a receiver. So there has to be something at the other end receiving that message or information. It could be another person, it could be another computer, it could be anything basically that receives the message that is being communicated. Right, so these are the elements of sport communication. So these are the things that need to be present in order for communication to occur in a sport context. So, like we have already said, there needs to be a source that is the origin of the message or the information or the knowledge that is being communicated. There needs to be a channel, which is also the medium that I've spoken about previously in the last slide. There needs to be a receiver and the message that is being communicated. So this process can then be conceptualized to look like the diagram in front of you. Pardon the noise in my background. Right, so this process can then be conceptualized to look like this diagram that we are looking at here. Right, so the message originates at the source. Okay, so that is the sender of the message. And once that message leaves the source, then it is encoded. Okay, so what I'm saying right now is an encoded message, which is then being transferred. Okay, so that is known as movement of message through the channel or the medium. Okay, so this message is then encoded and then it moves through the medium. And then once it is received by the receiver, it is then decoded by said receiver. Okay, so the receiver needs to be able to decode that message. What do we mean by decoding? We mean that they need to understand, they need to make sense of the message in order to receive it. Once they have received the message, they then send feedback. It could be anything. It could be a note to say, yes, I've received the message. It could be a text back. It could be a phone call back, anything to show that the message has been received. For example, if I'm looking at my computer and I type in some instructions, that's me, the sender or the source, encoding a message through my fingers. Okay, they are the channel in this instance to the computer, which then receives and then gives me feedback by doing what I want it to do. Right, but in any communication process, unfortunately, there is interference. What is interference? Interference is basically anything that can disrupt the message that is being communicated to the receiver. Could interrupt the encoding process, it could interrupt the decoding process, it could be noise in the waves, it could be people talking over what I'm saying, it could be the background noise that you heard a little bit earlier. All those are forms of interruptions that can disrupt the message from being successfully encoded and or decoded by the receiver. Right. So, what is sport communication? We've spoken about communication in general. We've spoken about the components and the important things of communication. We've spoken about the communication process. But what is sport communication? What does it mean for sport? Right. So, in sport, communication becomes a process where people in sport or people that are in a sports setting or people that are not in a sports setting use sport to communicate, to share symbols, to create meaning, and they do all this through interaction. That is sport communication. So it becomes a little bit more robust, it becomes more complete when you look at it in a sport context because there is so much more involved in communication than sending messages. It's a matter of interaction with the audience. There is the issue of sharing symbols, understanding each other, building relationships, and all this is done through communication. So, what are the functions of sport communication? Why is it necessary for the sport industry to communicate? Okay, so first of all, it's to create exposure for the sport organizations. Remember, at its core, sport is a social entity. So without the fans, without the community, without the people, without the audience, there is no purpose for the sport industry. So we need to be able to create exposure for the sport organizations in order for them to garner that communal interest of the people around them in order for them to exist. Right. So that also creates value for the products, the programs, or the services that are being offered by this sport organization. What do we mean by sport products? Okay, so sport products, as you would know from your marketing, are goods or services or anything involved in sport that are then consumed by avid sport consumers. Okay, I'm sure you can define it a lot better than I can, but that is what we are talking about in this instance. We need to create value for those products through communication. Right, so sport communication involves interdependent and interactive communication. What is the difference between interdependent and interactive communication? It means that it's a network. Okay, so we cannot unilaterally, as a sport organization, communicate outside. We need to depend on the feedback that we receive. Okay, the interaction that we get from the fans, the noise that the fans make in the stadium when there's a game being played, the the presence of our fans at the stadiums, the communication online, our fans putting posts, making memes, creating videos, all those are types of sport communication. That's interactive communication. And without it, we do not have communication at all in sport. So it's quite interdependent on the organization itself putting itself out and the fans giving a lot of feedback. Right. And sport communication allows for feedback from all entities, that is, all stakeholders involved within that industry. All right. So there are a few things that you need to be aware of in communication in the sport industry, and we'll cover these things throughout the course. We will take a very uh, specific and quite intensive look at the sport media. We'll look at television, we'll look at radio, the internet, publications, and so on. And we will also look at the things that are included in sport communication, which is interpersonal communication, organizational communication, public relations, sport marketing, and sport social media. Okay, so we'll look at all those things. Okay, we will brush on a few things like intrapersonal communication, that's communication within yourself. We will also talk about communicating to your stakeholders to a lesser extent. We'll also take a look at the legalities involved in sport communication and so on. Okay, so those are the things that you can expect as we go through this course, and you'll find that they are related to your assignments as well, your writing skills, speaking skills, um, listening skills, as well. We'll go through all of that as we go through the course. So let's say you are a business minded person and you have decided to start your own sport public relations company or your own sport communications company, sport media company. Depends on who you are and what you want to do. So, what kind of person do you hire then for this organization? Who are your staff members? If you are to write an advert to employ people for your company, what characteristics would you ask for in your candidates? So these are the characteristics that we look for in sport communication. Okay, so this person needs to be good at communication. So what do we mean by communication in the first place? Is this person able to express themselves clearly? Do they speak well? How many language can they interact in? Do they have good people skills? And so on. So those are the kind of characteristics that we encapsulate in that word, good at communication. And when we say positive appearance, demeanor, and behavior, that's very important, unfortunately, in public relations, because your appearance is a communication of your attitude. So if the person appears shabby and untrustworthy, then they cannot be successful in this industry. You need to present yourself as somebody that can be trusted so that what you say makes a lot of sense and people can trust it and believe in it and also are able to take it to the bank. I suppose we can put it in that way. Right, this person needs to be courteous. Okay, so you need to be polite at all times. We cannot have a public relations person representing an organization who will speak in slang. That is very unprofessional, first of all. And secondly, it's very discourteous and does no credit for the brand whatsoever. So it's quite important for these characteristics to be present within a professional engaging in sport communication. Like we mentioned previously, they need to be trustworthy, they need to be assertive. So this person needs to be able to make decisions on their own. So they need to be autonomous and they need to be able to take responsibility for the decisions that they make. See, the thing is, if you are in the communication industry, you cannot always control people's opinions and people's reactions. So you might say something that might sound offensive to the next person. You then need to quickly make an assertive decision, be autonomous, and take responsibility for what you have said, and then take care of that situation quickly. Now, this is a very important section, and I'd like you to maybe think around the characteristics of these professionals and maybe gauge where you stand. Okay, so evaluate yourself and then tell us in the next class if you think you have these characteristics of being a professional in the sport communications industry. Do you think you have a place in this industry? Do you think you can do this job? Can you maybe identify a few more things that make you um, the better person for this kind of industry? All right. So once you have identified the characteristics within yourself or within your potential staff members, you then need to check if they have the skills that are needed to work in your company. Right. So what are some of the essential skills that are needed in sport communication? This person would ideally have a multidisciplinary knowledge. For example, if they are good at English, it would help if they have good IT knowledge as well. Then they can use the social media, they can use the websites to communicate rather than just sticking with maybe emails and writing memos and newsletters and so on. So the world continues to evolve, and now data analysis is a in thing in communication because we need to grasp all those numbers and we need to be able to how do you say this? Categorize. That's what I'm looking for. You need to be able to categorize and keep those statistics for future communication. So you need to be able to be multidisciplinary, flexible, and be able to keep up with this changing media and um, information. Right, you also need to have a good knowledge of sport management. There are a lot of legalities that are involved in communication. There are a lot of There's a lot of jargon that you need to be familiar with for that specific organization. Okay, for example, for clothing, you will not use the same jargon that you would use in the sport field. Okay, so it is important for you to be knowledgeable of sport management, and in particular for the organization that you are working for. It's imperative to have excellent writing, reading, and speaking skills. Okay, I'm not the best speaker in the world, but I know I've got good writing and reading skills. Why is writing important? Because in order for you to be able to speak well, you need to be able to frame what you're going to say. So, excellent writing is important for you to be able to express the right thing at the right time for your organization. One misspelling, one wrongly said word could be detrimental to the success of your represented organization's brand image. So it's very important to have excellent writing skills. Reading is quite important in order for you to be able to interpret. Okay, so you need to be able to critically read information that comes your way so that you don't misinterpret and then misinform. Okay, so reading is also a key skill that is necessary for communication, in particular in sport. And I've already spoken about speaking skills, right? You need to be able to express yourself. You need to not bore your audience. You need to be able to target the right people and use the right vocabulary for them. Right, and people management skills, similar to the characteristics, you need to be able to um, engage well with the people that you're communicating to. All right, so these are some of the career options that are available for people that choose to specialize in communication for sport. Right, so there's quite a few that you can look into. I'm sure you can think of a lot more. Maybe it would be interesting for us to discuss this in the next class where we meet face in a live session. I think that would be quite fun. We could also take this onto our WhatsApp platform. Okay, I think we should also engage a few other platforms. I will open a Facebook page for us to engage in, and we can take all these across those platforms at your convenience. Right, so I'm sure you've all received the subject guide as well as the assignments that we need to do for this course. So I will be on WhatsApp and I will be communicating so that you can let me know what deadlines you have chosen and we can go over any questions that you have. Remember, this class is quite important. And if you cannot make the live sessions, I will try as much as I possibly can to the best of my ability to make sure that you get all the information that is discussed inside the classroom. Perhaps these recorded sessions could also be of assistance. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening throughout. I will see you in our class.